Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining Toro's first breakfast briefing discussing AI and security. My name's Liv. I'm Toro's head of marketing, and I'm just going to run through a quick agenda, a bit of housekeeping, introduce our wonderful speakers, Katie and Gavin, and then I'll be handing over. So firstly, today, what are we going to discuss? So obviously, we're going to talk about the AI revolution and how it is taking over the world. Well, not quite, but then we're also going to talk about the benefits of AI and security, and also look at the risks. And then we're going to look at how that we can mitigate those AI security risks and what we expect to see from AI kind of moving into 2024 and the future. And then we're going to finish with some Q&As. Please, kind of throughout the session, do pop any questions in the chat box, and we'll answer these at the end. So our wonderful speakers today are obviously Katie, who's Toro's Director of Cybersecurity, and Gavin, who is Toro's Director of Physical Security and Investigations. So a quick bit of housekeeping. So today's session is being recorded, and you will receive the recording at the end of the session. As I said, please ask questions throughout, and we will answer those questions at the end. So we plan to make this breakfast briefing a regular feature moving into 2024. So if there are any topics that you would like us to cover kind of over the next 12 months, please again pop those in the chat box, or if not, reach out to me or send us a message on LinkedIn, because we obviously want to cover some topics that you're really interested in. So that's all the boring bits done. I will hand over to Katie and Gavin.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so you might have noticed that your news streams are flooded with AI stories and use cases. And for the purposes of this webinar, we've given AI this definition that we've put on screen, which actually came from the UK government's recent AI Safety Summit, which was hosted just last month. In practice, this means large language models that you might be more familiar with, such as ChatGPT or Google's Gemini, which is its new version of Bard. So for the most part, this means people are using AI to essentially replace their own employment by automating things they were pretending they already knew how to do, but have been winging for years, or they are trying to resolve that existential crisis by asking AI the meaning of life, or they're simply trying to tell the difference between a blueberry muffin and a chihuahua. But in all seriousness, concerns towards ethics in AI are prevalent, and there are still major limitations. For example, reliability and factual accurateness. However, the speed at which it is developing indicates unprecedented evolution in this AI revolution. So, what does this mean to the security industry?
Well, a good example in physical security is CCTV surveillance systems. We have been using smarter CCTV systems for some time now, but historically, video analytics were prone to high levels of false alarms, often resulting in this technology being unusable. In recent projects, I've seen how CCTV can be used to good effect, creating virtual detection areas within buildings and on the external perimeters. Through AI, these systems have learned to adapt to their environment and are no longer being triggered by a change of light, moving animals, or vegetation. AI and security is here to stay. In the UK alone, spend on AI technologies is predicted to rise over £35 billion by 2025, from a current worth of 15 billion today. Wow. The cybersecurity industry is expected to grow exponentially compared to the physical security industry. And whilst this cannot be completely attributed to AI, it can certainly be considered a major factor.
So why do we use it?
Well, generally to improve economic efficiency. For example, automating legal work, increasing the productivity of call centre workers, AI-enabled robotics for manufacturing and production, or accelerating academic research and medical diagnosis and treatment. AI can write long sequences of well-functioning code, instructed by people who don't know how to write code themselves, such as me, Katie.
I wouldn't try if I were you, Gavin. AI can also write news articles, translate between multiple languages, summarize huge volumes of content, generate creative content, and answer questions that actually require common sense reasoning. It can score highly on high school and undergraduate exams in many subjects, and we'd be naive to think our kids haven't already figured this out.
Well, I haven't figured out yet. Anyway, so what are the benefits? The benefits are really evident in many cases. And these user cases are being mentioned and widely publicized. But let's start with physical security. Since we have become familiar with seeing for ourselves the contribution AI and smarter technology is making in our homes, travel, and in our workplaces. AI is being used in security technology such as CCTV, intruder detection, and access control systems for its ability to manage mass data for threat detection. AI-powered systems can analyze large volumes of data and identify anomalies in real time far quicker than any human can, apart from me, of course. An example of this is weapons detection, where AI can process thousands of images a second from multiple CCTV camera feeds, or the recent use of AI in surveillance systems by London Underground to detect passengers passing through barriers without paying. I mean, London Underground loses something around £130 million a year from fare dodgers. So you'll have to pay up from now on, Katie.
I always check in and check out.
No. Machine learning gives accuracy to video surveillance systems, enabling security teams to optimize their resources. This is especially important in the UK, where the manned guarding industry is suffering a labour shortage, largely attributed to low pay and unsociable working hours. And that is expected to continue in the long term. AI-powered robotics can replace human tasks such as patrolling, access management, explosives and weapons detection, and emergency response. For instance, drones have long been used for wide area surveillance and threat tracking from the air. Security technology can now autonomously integrate data with other building and operational management systems to apply learning, optimize performance, and improve efficiencies. Indeed, a study found 76% of chief operating officers believe increasing automation in buildings and asset management will have a positive impact on operational efficiency. Language models can be used to instruct security staff in best practices. So, how does AI disrupt physical security? It can make security technology work better to detect a wider range of threats. It will remove the mundane elements in manned guarding, perhaps resolving the labour issues. It will improve operational management and help organisations to optimise resource and improve performance. It will also require an upskilling in the workforce and enhance the human capability. In my opinion, one of the greatest benefits will be the convergence of security practices, where there is a greater reliance on cybersecurity and cyber awareness in the physical security space in this tech-enabled environment.
So we can work together more closely than ever, Gavin. In cybersecurity, there are also benefits. AI can upskill and enhance the capability and accuracy of our cybersecurity professionals by providing them the ability to detect threats in real time. AI tools can continuously monitor system activity and network traffic for suspicious behavior by spotting anomalies. These tools can learn from past attacks and refine their detection so they become more accurate over time and quicker, improving their response mechanisms. So, for example, in this year's Cost of a Data Breach report by IBM, it cites that companies with AI solutions in place were able to identify and contain a breach 108 days quicker than those without. This acceleration is crucial in mitigating both the reputational damage of a breach, but also the financial damage. So those companies with AI solutions reported a $1.76 million lower cost of their breach in the wake of a cyber attack compared to organizations that didn't have such capabilities. Automation has the potential for streamlining those BAU tasks, such as patch management, vulnerability management, that are often deprioritized in favor of business change and new projects, despite the fact it's those day-to-day activities that are most usually the cause of cyber attacks and data breaches. So those are the benefits, but what about the risks?
Yeah, where are the risks? Well, AI poses risks that do not respect natural, ethical, or national boundaries. It will follow a pattern which it is trained to follow. How about the risks in politics? Well, there is a lack of regulation and controls, where economies of scale and other market risks are evident. No one wants to give away their homework where AI production costs are known to be incredibly high. Work by standard development organizations such as IEEE, ISO, and IEC is still ongoing. Market failures are observed in many global challenges. Think of climate change. When a company produces carbon emissions, the harms are not only incurred by them, but by the whole world. They do not incur the full cost. So there is an externality and therefore a lack of incentive to reduce harm. Companies will prioritize economic growth, often reflected by speed of development, over risk mitigation within the technology they use. Policymakers will struggle to reconcile, as they always have done, societal protection against technological advancement and economic growth. And in the physical environment, our buildings, biological and chemical security risks, where language models teach threat actors how to make and deploy harmful substances, including bombs. Critical infrastructure attacks and mass data exposures following a systems breach or unlawful use by an insider. He suddenly has access to all this information. I'm talking about people risks, inaccuracy and AI hallucinations, degradation of the information environment, encouraging individuals to make dangerous decisions. There are already cases of AI tools inadvertently radicalizing individuals, nudging users towards harmful actions. We've already sadly seen the harmful effects of harmful content in social media, and the self-perpetrating algorithms exposing vulnerable people to that content. And this has contributed or suggested to contribute towards suicide. Whilst these dangers already exist in the technology and are not specific to AI, AI can certainly speed up and exacerbate these harms.
Humans could also become too reliant on AI tools and ultimately de-skill because they hand over control of important decisions to AI systems and don't use their own judgment to gauge a concern or respond appropriately. In fact, Gartner predicts that by 2025, general human failure will be responsible for over half of all significant cyber incidents. So as the technology gets smarter, people become more reliant and less able to challenge AI-generated results. In technology generally, I mean, who can read a paper map using a compass these days versus blindly following Google Maps?
I can.
Yeah, but that's because you're old.
Yeah, but that can have an advantage. Look, a couple of weeks ago, I was watching a webinar on AI, and one of the presenters mentioned before mobile phones, they used to know several phone numbers, and they still do. And indeed, I still remember the phone numbers of my best friends from when I was a kid. But if he lost his mobile phone, he wouldn't be able to call his wife because he hasn't learned her number. And indeed, that's the same for me. The phone stores it for him.
I think, Gav.
Yeah, that probably is. Don't tell her. Is this being recorded?
Yes.
But ultimately, the phone stores a number, it does it for us. So there's a bit of dumbing down on that intelligence that we've had. Another people risk is that AI gives people access to far more information, increasing the insider threat.
And who needs an insider threat when you can create a deep fake Has anyone ever heard their bank use voice authentication to access their account? My voice is my password. Please don't take that from the recording. If we look at telephone banking, Santander, NatWest, Barclays, Lloyds, HSBC, they all use Voice ID, despite cases of AI voice cloning being widely publicised. And then you've got examples of C-level fraud, even deep fake porn or revenge porn, which links closely to what's going on in social media, where the further degradation of the information environment is combined with the increasing amounts of personal data that we and our acquaintances and our friends and family are making publicly available. This is leading to influence and increasing amounts of misinformation and disinformation. So people and events are becoming easier to falsely portray. This might compromise decision making by individuals and institutions who rely on inaccurate or misleading information. And we've already seen a lot of noise about this in relation to election interference and information warfare, especially related to the conflict in Ukraine and more recently Palestine. Not only that, but information overload leads to saturation. Already people turn off. A study by Ofcom revealed that 30% of UK adults who go online are unsure or don't even consider the truthfulness of the information they consume. In cyber generally, at the moment, there are no robust safeguards to prevent AI from complying with harmful requests. You can ask it to design you a cyber attack, and it will. And there are already nefarious equivalents of ChatGPT, such as WormGPT, FraudGPT, and DarkBart, which are all specifically designed to create custom malware and well-written spear phishing emails, for example. Safety testing and evaluation of AI is ad hoc. There aren't any established standards, scientific grounding, or engineering best practices. If you think about software development, developers prescribe precisely the instructions for specific actions in software, and this enables them to predict the system's behavior and understand its limitations. But by contrast, AI developers merely specify a learning process, but the system produced by that process is not interpretable even to the developers that made it. So they genuinely cannot know its limitations except as they come up in use, and we happen to recognize them. So what can we do about it, Gav?
You're asking me. It is important that governments, academia, and businesses and civil society work together to navigate these risks, which are complex and hard to predict, to mitigate the potential dangers and to ensure AI benefits society. Perhaps we can start with regulation or frameworks. Currently being considered is the White House Blueprint for AI Bill of Rights, the NIST, Artificial Intelligence Risk Management Framework, and of course, what we've heard recently around Europe and the UK, the European Union AI Act. For our purposes, what can we do in our organisations to mitigate these risks? We think focus on the brilliant basics. Have a plan. Understand your threats, the current and future projected situation within your organisation, what you're doing, where you're going, and where security improvements or enhancements will need to be made. Having a clear purpose will help you to identify where your investments need to be made in the short and in the long term. Start with a policy that defines legitimate use and make sure it is published and understood. Involve your workforce in this process. Understand why they are already using AI. What tasks are they trying to automate and augment? What are the potential benefits for your organisation? How can you continue to leverage these benefits whilst recognising and mitigating the potential risks? Create a process to assess and approve or decline existing use cases.
And don't neglect the underlying IT systems and infrastructure. At an organisational level, if you're the one developing something for public consumption, ensure it is secure by design. This means having separate environments for development and testing, ensuring a robust due diligence process for any new suppliers and tools that your staff or your business want to integrate into your processes. Protect that underlying infrastructure against vulnerabilities and exploitation. Validate that your existing processes for patch management and vulnerability management still work when you've got new technology in place. And check whether the controls, monitoring, and alerts that you may have had still apply when you have these new tools and processes in place. At an end user level, protect against staff downloading or accessing and using applications that haven't been subject to the appropriate level of due diligence, even if that means them just uploading business information and data into hosted AI engines like ChatGPT, where ultimately your control over that data is lost. Ensure you've got the controls in place to prevent them from downloading or accessing things that you don't want to, but ultimately work with them to have the layers of defense that you need to protect your business. So improving authentication and conditional access controls to better safeguard their credentials against theft by criminals, for example, because at the end of the day, these still end up being the keys to everything. You need to think about your policies. Consider the influence of AI. Stricter rules and more training will need to be applied to prevent unethical use and that insider threat. So ensure that staff understand how to use the tools that are available to them. A higher level of education will need to be incorporated into training programs to develop competency. Ultimately, a higher level of threat requires a higher level of awareness.
And this is where assessment and assurance will become increasingly important. Frequent assessments by experts will be required to keep you hardened against increasing sophistication and potential scale of attack. A faster paced and progressive environment will require greater levels of auditing and testing to ensure security stays ahead. Adopting AI-enabled operational management systems to monitor and detect operating risk is likely to become a standard for many businesses. Smarter technology encourages people to be smarter. By reducing the mundane work in security and giving greater use of technology and access to better learning resources, we will upskill the security workforce and better bridge the physical and cyber security divide. We must also, and after all, teach our people to use digital systems to full effectiveness, but doing it safely and securely. I believe this will be a focal point as we continue to make use of smarter technology and security.
You can see from these statistics that the advent of AI is inevitable. And from a cybersecurity perspective, closely linked to the physical security domain, there will be a greater threat as a result of AI enhanced attacks. And that's going to mean that we need to use AI threat detection and response tools to combat that. And it also means there's going to be an increased demand for security professionals that know how to manage these tools. Ultimately, AI is only as good as the humans behind it. That's it from us this morning, but there are already some questions coming in.
Thanks, guys. So one question that we had beforehand that I just wanted to start with is, do you guys think that AI is a blessing or a curse? What's your thoughts, Casey?
I think I've already alluded to it on that last slide. I think it's inevitable. We've got to embrace it because it's happening whether we like it or not. And we've just got to make sure that we can keep up with it and mitigate the risks that it brings. We've seen that there's a lot of benefits. So if we can leverage them, then that could be a great positive. But equally, if we don't leverage those benefits, then we run the risk of those negative aspects overrunning us.
How about you, Gavin?
Yeah, and we're always, we're seeing it take effect. If we look at buildings security or facility security, CCTV technology from video analytics, and now the use of machine learning is giving us a much wider range. We're seeing cost savings, cost benefits, where we're no longer having to deploy lots of people. The people are able to use the technology to their advantage. And we've already discussed the resource issue and the labour issue within the manned guarding industry, which isn't expected to change. But ultimately, I think AI and machine learning, and particularly within security technology, depends on the intention of the user. We've already seen, some of the disruptive effects it can have when images of people are, published to the news. So as we use the technology, we need to make sure that people can use it appropriately and ethically.
Just that kind of ties into a question that we've just had through. Do you have a view on the ethical considerations in the use of AI? Don't know who wants to take that one, Katie.
Well, I think we've already seen, sort of group letters to policymakers from formerly heavily invested professionals in this space who clearly have some reservations about the level of investment and the potential for, economic growth versus the potential impact on society. Personally, we work in the space of risk management, so I'm always going to be erring on the side of caution and believing that ethical considerations should weigh just as heavily as progress. But I'm realistic that in the general market, that profit and growth will often trump. And I think that's where we need to make sure that the ethical considerations get as much of a voice.
Thank you. Gavin, have you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think we're advancing with the technology quicker than what we are with regulation and standards, and they need to catch up. Ethical use has to be worked through integrity. We've seen the damning effects and the impacts that having access to mass data, particularly sensitive data, identifiable data can have. And we're looking potentially. You're looking at when the manned guarding industry, who typically monitor CCTV systems. One of the big issues they have is low pay, unsociable working hours. It's considered a low skill environment. I would argue that, having worked in there myself. But with those impressions, you're suddenly giving people who potentially are not treated as well as they should be, particularly around salaries, access to sensitive data. And so training, upskilling has to be key.
Thank you. I've got another couple of questions. Do you have any insights into how companies are addressing or combating voice impersonation, i.e. how to identify a client when calling them to confirm an instruction received?
Yeah, this is a really important one. We've long said if you are processing a financial transaction, don't just do it off the back of an invoice that's come in over email. Call and verify that the details are correct and the bank account details are accurate, because we have seen that as a method of committing fraud. With voice impersonation, this obviously becomes a little bit more tricky, and ultimately it's a combination of things. It's people, process and technology, so it's having layers of controls. Have that process in place with your client who is going to call and give the verification, and you're going to call the number that you trust.
Yeah.
And then you're not going to rely on, the client calling you, because it's possible to spoof a phone number. So it might look like a number that you recognize, but if you were sent an email with an invoice and then you later received a phone call saying, I'm just calling to verify the payment details on that invoice, my advice would be to say, thank you for the call. I'm going to call back and follow the process that we've pre-agreed, which is I'm calling the trusted number and I'm following the process to authorize that transaction. So yeah, it does take a little bit more thought to preempt and agree that process with your clients and your other parties that you're engaging in transactions with. But that little bit of forethought could save you millions in fraud.
Thanks. Gavin, anything to add on that? I think Katie's covered it all.
Hopefully they don't use my voice.
Let's had another question through. There's a general fear of job loss due to AI growth. Do you think software developer jobs are under threat because of AI?
No, I think they've just got to evolve. I think they're just changing. So, you know, whilst AI can write code, we still need to be able to verify it and understand what it's doing and leverage that capability. So I think software developers are going to have to be able to use those tools that are becoming available so that they can keep up with the advancement of that technology. And I think we can't sit on our laurels, but we can't with any advent of new technology. So those ones that will be most successful are the ones that can leverage the tools that are out there and then adapt their skills, because ultimately it's a level playing field. Everyone's got access to these tools, and there is still going to be a need to turn those tools into something that's usable, safe, sellable, and that's what's going to be required.
Thanks. Gavin?
Well, I'll turn that a little bit in that if we look at security consultants, for instance, our use of writing policies and procedures, governance models, and suddenly you have language models that, you type in some search words and it can pretty much give you enough content to write a policy. But that's a bit alarming to me in that, you need to be able to take that. You need the experience and the knowledge to be able to write policy, procedures and frameworks for organizations. But what you could suddenly see is, lower skilled people utilizing those tools to provide that content. I think there will be damaging effects of that. But in all jobs, as the technology age advances, we've seen historically that some jobs that used to exist are no longer existing. You have to adapt. And I think, as Katie says, it's evolving with it. Make it work from you. Going back to that point that Katie mentioned earlier, AI is only as good as the humans who behind it, those who use it. Evolve and make better use of it instead of actually getting it to work against you.
Thank you. So I've had another question in from Tarquin. It says, with you here yesterday monitoring public sentiment and discussion related to the secured premises, do you feel AI can assist in proactive risk assessment and management? And to what extent does it influence the work you started here yesterday?
Hi, Tarquin. It's always great to see you. I do. Actually, there are some really good risk management models out there and operational management models. Now, they haven't, in my opinion, they've started to use some machine learning, but not to a full extent yet. This mainly around integration, where you feed information into there and then it just gives you some results. I've worked on some really useful software, some great software that is starting to learn, and it's giving you some really good balances of your risk environment. So yes, and when we look at risk, we're not just looking at the negative effects or what we call pure risk. We're looking at speculative risk, the positive effects as well. So we need to see the balance, and we know, working in physical security, those awful people in cybersecurity always get the budget. They always get the attention, and we're suddenly left behind. But where in businesses you're focusing on one area and then you're neglecting another, you'll always get that imbalance, right? And we are seeing models now, operational models, including risk management models, that are teaching us and showing us that balance and giving us that really high level view effect that we need to see. So I feel personally, AI, particularly where you have multiple buildings, multiple sites, feeding in that data, those systems will better be able to identify where risk is occurring, where performance issues are happening, so that you can give you better or more foresight for the future. And I think it's also going to help in security design. It will help us to identify through crime statistics, through feedback from clients on site, where security needs to be, where it can perform better. It will allow us to put our people to optimize the performance of our people, as we've discussed today. It won't just resolve the resource issues, the labor issues that we're seeing. It will allow us to better put our people where they need to be. And through technology, of course, we've been heavily reliant in physical security on control rooms. So a control room operator watching 100 cameras, where in effect they're only watching about 50%, sometimes less than that, because they can't see, you don't have big enough screens. Well, we're now getting that technology on handheld devices. So through the AI and machine learning, the systems tell us when there's a problem. It will alert us to it, show us what's happening, and that enables us to better respond. So from technology, from software, from risk management, AI and machine learning will actually put all this information in front of us so that we can make those decisions. We don't want it to make the decisions for us, but it enhances us. And I think AI, machine learning, and smarter security technology, it enhances what we do. It takes us from the basics, the brilliant basics, to the beyond brilliant basics, if you put it in that way.
Thanks, Gavin. Katie, have you got anything to add?
Not on that, but I've just seen another question come in from James.
So the question, Gen AI is expected to amplify attacks such as ransomware and phishing, increasing the threat. How do you think businesses can step up to these heightened risks?
I think it's a really good question, because I think there's an uneducated view that automation can replace human resource. And I think IT teams in organizations and resource from IT MSPs that support organizations is already under-resourced and overutilized. And I think businesses have to invest. Ultimately, all companies are IT companies. They're all technology companies. I don't know a single organization that can run without its computers or its software or its tools. And this means that the threats that apply to those IT systems and the tools being used need to have an equal amount of investment in defending them. And I think too many companies are slow to appreciate this and see IT and technology as an enabler rather than just a cost to the business. And I think those companies that have a more progressive way of looking at it will be the ones better positioned to excel, and the ones less likely to be significantly impacted by an attack. And so I think it's investment, I think it's upskilling, I think it's having the necessary resource and capability, whether that's in-house or supported by security professionals, to protect your critical assets as an organization. And those critical assets are almost certainly going to be contained within IT systems and are likely to be some kind of data, intellectual property, personal data of customers, clients. And unless that is protected, the business is risking enormous reputational and financial cost against an ever-evolving threat, which is a game of whack-a-mole. And the criminals will keep investing in these tools and evolving their techniques because there is something in it for them. And so we have to continually evolve as well to keep up with it. And if the businesses don't, then they will find themselves significantly impacted by it.
you. Gavin, anything to add?
I think that's quite far.
Yeah,
Thank you,
yeah.
Katie.
Yes, thank you.
I feel
Cool.
quite strongly about that. You might be able to tell.
I had one question in that came in the other day that I thought was quite interesting. AI can provide answers, but do you think it can contextualize information? Or do you think it will get there? It's quite interesting to hear your thoughts. What do you
Well,
think?
I mean, the research suggests that it is getting better at applying context and reasoning, but it can't yet replace the human kind of touch, I suppose. Yeah, it is evolving really fast. So I think there are also already examples where it's very difficult to tell the difference between something that's been written or created by a machine and something that's been done by a human. I think we just need to learn how to use that and how to kind of validate where necessary the difference. Gavin, do you have any thoughts on that? It's quite a tricky one.
Well, it's artificial intelligence, so yes, of course, it probably could if you train it to do that, and that's what AI is. It's what you're training it to do, and we need to manage those risks. And this is what we had the big forum in the UK a couple of weeks ago, and that's what it's about. How do we manage those risks? Do we have the standards where they need to be? Whilst we have good intended use, good intentions, a threat actor wouldn't. And they can take those good intentions and use it to their advantage.
Yeah.
So probably, possibly, yes, but we need to manage it.
Yeah.
And ultimately it gets back down to, AI is only as good as the humans behind it.
Yeah. I think that's so important. Okay, so thank you so much, guys, and thank you for everyone that sent in questions. We, as I said, we're going to be making this a regular feature. So the next one is probably like to be February next year. So if there are any topics that you do want us to cover, please do get in touch. Thanks again to everyone that joined. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Gavin. Feels mad saying this, but Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy New Year. And we'll look forward to doing another one next year. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Liv.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Nice to see everyone.
Bye.